I'm going to go over toes to rings or toes through rings as an exercise that you can implement with individuals. And I'll talk about a couple of the finer points of it. But again, I'll walk around it because it's kind of a simple movement. We want to walk around and talk about like preliminary things that we want people to have, where you put it into program design, and then little touches on some major things you want people to focus on for cues. Okay? So I like having the idea of people actually putting their toes through the rings as a goal, because then it becomes a goal outcome for them as opposed to just doing the movement. You also want to cue them on understanding extension and flexion the entire time. So I think it's really important that as we as coaches talk about it in terms of what we want to see in the cueing of the exercise, but we also want to discuss it with our clients so they recognize and they're inside their body and they understand and creating, let's just call it more consciousness of where their body sits in space when they do it, and it's going to really upgrade their ability to do the exercise, okay? So the movement will look like this. I'll go through a couple of repetitions and we'll talk about some pieces of reps and sets and design, where it fits in program design, and some pieces to think about as to why we choose it. Okay? My left foot didn't go through, so that doesn't count as a rep. All right, that's toes through rings. The reason why I like it as a prescription is that it is an open environment for the shoulder. And when people progress through toes to rings, because you can remember, I'll give you an example. In 1993, toes to bar was not even thought of in fitness, okay? Fast forward 10 years, 2005, and 3% of everyone is doing toes to bar. But a shit ton of gymnastics is being done on stall bars or versions of it, right? Now it's 2017, and the entire population of fitness understands what a toes to bar is. Why I like the rings, because of the ability to be able to move the shoulders, allows an individual, it challenges obviously different things because it's a little bit more unstable environment, but it allows that shoulder to move a little bit more free. So what you get in confining to a bar is that the body has to work around that stable unit. And so if the person doesn't have great mechanics or motor control head to toe, obviously to get into that full extension, full flexion position, then you can see that they're going to be able to put together more intensity in a toes to bar, but it's not going to allow for that range of motion that they're going to get with toes through rings. So I'll give you a personal example for me is that I could pump a whole bunch out for toes to bar in a max set, but my battery of them when I'm tired is quite poor. Reason being is that I have some mechanical challenges with getting full arm extension and full thoracic extension in that position, okay? But what I would be able to do on the toes to rings would be that max set still, but I would be able to have a great battery afterwards because my shoulders can move in a more free space to accommodate to the exercise. So hopefully my story gives you a little bit of insight as to how to help individuals with it. But preparation for this movement. I would rather you see people get to level 3, level 4, level 5 core assessment. If you're doing the new assessment for CCP, I would much rather people be in the 3rd level of strength, or let's call it relative strength, into structural balance strength before you start giving this tool in a skill environment. If you are going to be giving the toes through rings, I would prefer you do it in the skill progression where you do it all by itself. And because of the action, the dynamic contractions of it, it would actually be really beneficial if you're using it as a skill to put it in the front part of the workout for individuals. Just based upon it being a gymnastic skill that has dynamic contractions, it sits in the speed strength continuum. Therefore, we can put that as the front end of the training session in a skill pattern all by itself. So, Johnny walks in and he's got his preparation done and he's done his general warm-up. Then why don't you start with some toes through rings, every 45 seconds for 2 or 3 reps. So you're teaching him the skill in a format that's a non-fatigued environment. And then I'm not going to go through the lengthy progression of skills for it, but you want to get into challenging that toes through rings in more aggressive environment over time. In fitness circles, we like to apply for individuals who can do toes to bar, toes through rings. We'd like to apply like a 50% of a patterning between toes to bar and toes through rings within programming, because it does offer that little bit of variation around the shoulders when people do it. Okay? Now on to cueing. So when you're cueing people on the activity, you want to make sure that they have an opposing grip when they do it. So when people grab onto the rings itself, for a different conversation, I might be concerned around where our hand sits or how we're going to grab onto it. But to make it really simple for the client, just make sure that they have an opposing grip, that you start them with that immediately on the toes through rings. The reason for that is you're going to have a really great engagement of the entire flexor chain when people do that. So if you false grip it, it's not a bad thing, especially if your hands are small or if you're so used to grabbing like that. But you are going to create some compensations in the flexors of your wrist and your bicep that's going to come back to haunt you long term when you want to do dynamic reps in a really fast environment. Okay, so think competition or a testing scenario or something. So get people with an opposable grip, and it's opposite than a hook grip, right? So that would be a hook grip on a barbell. We're talking about trying to get their thumb as much as possible over their fingers, right, in the opposing pattern. And then that gripping technique is actually going to help them create control. Because if you think about it, the scapula is like the ass in that if this foot's in an open space, what controls this activity, how fast I do it, let's just say in a sprint, and it's a hip drive movement in a sprint, my hip is actually making this entire thing work. So now let's think about where the scap sits in space based upon that. Anything I'm doing with my arm, my scap is controlling a whole bunch of that. So now I'm going to take this, my foot, think of that, I'm going to lock it in place, right? It's locked. So what has to happen? This scapula has to control everything that works around it now, right? So if you see, mechanics throughout this movement where you get too much wrist flexion extension, as a coach's eye, how much is too much? Well, you see too much. If you see too much arm flexion and extension during the movement, any of those little tells, and also down the chain, right? If you see not enough flexion extension here, if you see too much flexion and extension here, that's telling you a whole lot around what this guy is doing. Remember, because this is the ass of the upper body. Just like when we do, hip drills for speed and sprinting, we can always look at the hip issue that dictates what's happening in those sprint mechanics. So when people are up here, you want to have them with that opposing grip, and you want to have arms straight and teach them cues of understanding tension on extension. I hope that makes sense, right? So extension is just not a free fall extension, right? So you want to teach them to actually create tension through their posterior chain. So I want to teach them to get back here, right? You want to get back here because that leads into an opposing movement of flexion a lot more effectively. And if you want to think about it, if it's a gripping pattern and you're asking people to do it under skill, then I would hope that they can do strict pull-ups or dead hangs from the bar really efficiently. And then as you pattern this flexion extension movement for people, just giving them that cue of tension under extension and then tension to get flexion will in their head make them recognize that this is not just flopping. That's the whole reason why we're giving that cue, right? You're not just flailing back and forth. A critical point for a coach to watch, which I like on the rings that you don't see, you see sometimes on the toes to bar, but if you're watching from the side and you start to see a lot of swinging action happening with people, that could be a timing and coordination around their control through their scapula, right? So as you know, as you're starting to move, just think of it as a pendulum back and forth underneath this, and I'm not even doing the full toes to bar, I should still see, a straight up and down pendulum. So I should see, my hands can't go back, my body should be doing that and that. That and that. And I should not be seeing swinging. So if you see swinging in the toes to rings, that's just a cue for you to ensure that they still have scap activation. That would be a good cue. Because then they'll start to recognize, oh wow, I can control how much I swing back and forth based upon how much I'm using that shoulder blade. Okay? A couple of other finer points for it. For repetitions, I would rather this be in a skill format that's proposed to be it's all by itself. And I'm a big fan of building this up to a really high amount of volume under a skill format before throwing it into metabolic environments, just due to its dynamic nature in contractions, okay? Again, I'll repeat, it's great for people who may have that slight right to left imbalance or even some issues with range of motion for their shoulders to involve it in an exercise sequence. And just make sure you cue extension and flexion when people do it. And then you'll be able to pick apart some things for it that'll be effective for your exercise selection. If you have any questions on it, don't hesitate to ask me. There's a deep rabbit hole we can go into in terms of design for capacity and things like that. But I just wanted to go over some fine pieces today that will help you start to describe this beyond just toes to bar. That'll help individuals for that flexion extension mechanism around the midline.